recognize the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Stauber, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for holding this important hearing, and Representative Siscomani, thanks for having us down here. Your staff is doing a great job. And so we talk about the southern border. What's happening at the southern border also affects the northern border. I represent northeastern Minnesota, so if you look on a map, the farthest right of eastern part of Minnesota, almost to that little notch and beyond. And then that's the Grand Forks sector. And you know that, Mr. Taquedo. There's 2 agents on duty tonight, 2 in over 500 miles. Do you know why? Because they're down here processing, or they're in their offices in the day in processing for what's happening down here. So we have 2 borders, folks, and this is my 3rd time as well coming down here, and I'll just share with you that a terrorist on the watch list got through the border of California, ended up in Minnesota, was there for almost a year before we realized that he was on the terror watch list, and took him into custody. But in that 8 or 9 months, it's alleged he was involved in arms sales. And then when you talk about the 1.7 million gotaways, 1.7 million gotaways, I want to remind the people that it took 19 terrorists to do that bastardly attack, 9/11. We don't know who they are, where they went, and what their intentions are. And that doesn't count the 85,000 children. We don't know where they are. And to the men and women in law enforcement who are wearing the uniform today in plain clothes, we thank you from the bottom of our heart for what you're doing. As one of only a few members in Congress that have ever worn the uniform, I have a good idea what you're going through. And Sheriff, when your folks are chasing, that's the most dangerous thing they can do. But the men and women put their lives on the line for the safety of us. Representative Fishback, myself, and the other Minnesota delegation, we sent a letter to Mayorkas, and I want to asking how did that terrorist get into the state of Minnesota? And Mr. Chair, I want to put that in the record, if I may.
Without objection.
Sheriff Daniels, first off, this is the first time you and I met.
Correct.
You are impressive.
Thank you.
Your service, your get-it-done attitude, and your truthfulness. And I am appalled that as a leader, a law enforcement leader in this county, that you have not received a response from our president, from the National Sheriff's Association, to meet with him. That is appalling.
It is.
Sheriff Daniels, can you elaborate on any instances of red tape, whether it be permitting challenges or otherwise, that is holding back your department from taking necessary action or making necessary investments to better respond to this border crisis?
Yes, and thank you for the fine comments. Thank you. I'm humbled. Let me say this, and we've presented a 16-point action plan to Secretary Mayorkas. I actually hand carried that to him, accompanied by about 10 other sheriffs. 3 months later, 4 months later, whatever the estimated time was, I asked him where we were at with that 16-point action plan, which was put together by nation sheriffs around the country. He stated to me, "Did you give me something, Sheriff?" We've never heard back since. We have sent a minimum of 4 letters to the White House to meet President Biden on behalf of the 4 major county sheriff association with no response. And that's been reconfirmed over and over to meet with us. This is the first president in modern day history not to meet with one sheriff in this country. We call that insulting. The other thing that's really hurting us is the failure to prioritize our southern border by this administration, the failure to follow the rule of law, the failure to have judicial oversight, and most important is the failure to have our CBP agents working alongside us because they've been redeployed for other administrative duties. We need our agents back and our officers back from the federal government and be allowed to do their job.
Totally agreed. Mr. Bolts, Mr. Chilton, thanks for your testimony. I've only got 20 seconds left. Mr. Chilton, with the number of people crossing your lands and wreaking havoc on your crops and the garbage, what does it cost you personally
We've tried to answer that question, and it costs me personally about $60,000 a year.
Was that?
$60,000 a year. But the real cost is the concern that my cowboys and my family might be violated, get caught between Border Patrol and the illegals in a gunfight.
Mr. Chair, can you indulge me for 30 more seconds? This president today, without any legislation, by executive action, can end catch and release, reinstate remain in Mexico, enter into asylum cooperative agreements, end parole abusers, detain inadmissible aliens, use expedited removal, rein in taxpayer-funded benefits for illegal aliens, and issue a proclamation to suspend or restrict entry. This is the exact same thing that Chairman Westerman just said. He can do that in 5 minutes by executive order, and I yield back.
I believe the gentleman from Minnesota directed the question to both Mr. Chilton and Mr. Bolts. Mr. Bolts, do you want to address that question of the cost to your operation as a result of illegal immigration?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stauber, myself and my neighbors, it costs those of us operating the roughly 40,000 acres that are closest to our international boundary anywhere from a couple $100,000 a year in cleanup to several $1 million a year. It just depends. We had a unique situation where a whole group of Haitian immigrants who were a little bit unique compared to most immigrants and asylum seekers, folks entering the country illegally, they camped out alongside one of our fresh produce fields, one of my neighbors, and stayed there for a couple of days. They were unique in that they weren't walking across the border and saying, here I am, where's my free bus ticket, my free meal ticket, my free airline ticket in my hotel room. They were less trusting of federal and local authorities, so they camped out for a couple of days, mostly women and children. You don't want people sitting next to your fresh produce field who you can't get to leave. So that was a unique situation, but yeah, unbelievable quantity of trash, refuse, trampling of crops. It's extraordinary. And the worst part about it is most of the folks that I mentioned in my testimony that legally work in agricultural fields in my community, the first and second generation immigrants, ask them what they think about what's going on today. They are appalled. These are people that spent tens of thousands of their own hard-earned dollars. Sometimes it impacted multiple generations. And they sit there and work every day and watch our government. They worked hard to become part of this country, a legal part of this country. They passed through checkpoints. They passed through ports of entry. They did it legally. And they are extremely appalled. Many of them are the ones out here picking up the trash, refuse, and trying to make use of the crops behind this tragedy.